Lesson 5, talking about revolutions, and now we're going to get into the Latin American revolutions. And this is a general term that's going to talk about, Mexico. We're going to talk about things in South America. So then I'm just going to lump it all together in Latin America. So again, I want you to notice how these changes came about. You're going to notice this is going to be a little bit different than the American Revolution and the French Revolution. So causes and effects, the big deals. And at the end of it, if you can identify the similarities and the differences, that might help in your summative question. So here is a bell ringer that I kept in, and usually I don't show these for credit recovery, but here's a really good map about all the Enlightenment thinkers and their ideas making their way officially south. So if you notice, 1, the American Revolution we've already talked about, 2, the French Revolution, which we've already talked about, and how everything is moving down here. So again, think about the rights, think about the rights that people were gaining. So why wouldn't other people try to do the same thing if they're being oppressed? So here are the 3 Latin American revolutions we're going to hone in on. 1, the Haitian Revolution, which is the most revolutionary of them all. Then we're going to get into different countries in South America, and I'm going to kind of pepper you with a few of them. And you'll notice that Brazil had their own unique way of having a peaceful revolution. And then the Mexican Revolution, it started in 1810, but it's going to filter into the 1820s and 30s. But all of this is because of Napoleon Bonaparte. And I take you back to the idea of imperialism, where these countries are going to have control over large portions of the world. Well, if their government's overthrown, then technically the other governments don't exist anymore and they're imperial colonies. So more about that when we come to them. But first, let's focus in on the Haitian Revolution. So where is it in the world? It's on this island of Hispaniola, and it's buddied up with the Dominican Republic. This has actually been in the news fairly recently. There's a bunch of hurricanes that always tend to hit there, and it really is kind of crappy. But when you look at Hispaniola, again, you got to notice where they're kind of coming from. They're coming from the Spain controlling them to the French controlling them. And then you're going to notice that, again, when Napoleon comes around, that's when things are going to get super interesting. But things to also know, in this area of the world, the most profitable crop is by far and away sugar, because everybody uses it in everything. Okay. So when it comes to making sugar, it's extremely hard work. People literally die from making it because you can't let it sit. So without going into the details of how it's all done, you have to break it down from a plant to what we know as sugarcane. As you know, that takes a while. So the people on this island are no strangers to hard work, and they're mostly under control from other people. So if you want to use the term slave, you could, but if you want to, let's just make it simple and call them slaves. So the amount of African slaves, or the amount of African workers on this island, by far and away outnumber the people that control them, the colonists, if you will. And you see the number, the total population, 88% of them were enslaved people. So this population, this numbers, I guess you would say, is going to be to their advantage here in a little bit, because they're actually going to revolt. So when the French Revolution started and they realized that there's chaos happening in their home country, that's when these slaves are going to kind of follow suit. And you're going to notice that one slave in particular, this, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but him is going to be kind of the leader of this revolt. And being the former slave that he is going to be no stranger to fighting, and he is going to basically be inspired by the other revolutions happening in the world. And everybody's catching wind of the major changes sweeping through the world. So he is actually going to be leading into our first question. The American Revolution and the French Revolution. Were they inspired? Sorry, I said that backwards. The Haitian Revolution. Were they inspired by the American and the French Revolutions? True or false? So back to this dude. So he is going to be kind of a mutt, I guess you would say. He's going to bounce back and forth between his allegiances because of those different revolutions that were happening. So where we're going to kind of care about this is that he was not on the French side, to make it super simple. And the French are the ones that want to reconquer Haiti, because when all the French Revolution is happening, they're actually going to get their independence. The slaves are going to get their independence. But when Napoleon takes over, which we talked about last lesson, he's going to want to reconquer Haiti and make them all slaves again. So that's when this guy's going to fight up and say, no, we're not doing that. And that's what's going to basically lead to his downfall. Since he is the leader, he's going to be captured and he's going to be executed. But then the power is then going to shift to this guy right here, Jean-Jacques, whatever his name is. And this is him. He is going to finish the job of the Haitian Revolution. And not only did he have a successful campaign against the French, he's actually going to keep the country of Haiti completely independent from all foreign rule. Now, this is interesting because they're super poor, but they're incredibly free and don't need to listen to any outside influence. So is that kind of a good thing or a bad thing? I'll leave it up to you. But the reason why all of this is happening, again, going back to Napoleon, he needed money. At the same time, in this moment in the world, he sold us the Louisiana Purchase because he needed money. He wanted to take over all of Europe. So when you go into the other South American revolutions, again, it goes back to Napoleon. When he is going to overtake when he's going to take over the French government, by the domino effects of things, countries in South America are going to be free as well because he takes over Spain. And why that's important is Spain are the ones that are going to be controlling all these countries in South America. So when the countries realize that they don't have that central figurehead back in Spain, they're going to start doing their own thing. And that's where you're going to see different ethnic groups that are indigenous to these places. And with these ideas of the Enlightenment still working their way in, you're going to notice that countries all around the South are going to start declaring their own independence. So which ones in particular are notable to us are going to be coming up. But the French revolutions caused several Latin American revolutions in South America. True or false? So these faces that we're talking about, Simon Bolivar, also known as the Liberator, and Jose de San Martin. So these are going to be two people that are going to work separately but have the same goal. They want countries inside of South America to be completely independent. So what Bolivar is doing is he's going to be like the general, the leadership, if you will, and so is Martin, but with different groups. But if you look at what their final actions were, they had the same idea. And here are the lists of the different revolutions that they led. And speaking as somebody, one too many. Speaking as somebody that has personally seen the effects of this when I studied abroad in Ecuador, they have these monuments of these two gentlemen all over South America. And this one in particular is in Quito, Ecuador, which I took at this picture right here. But why this is important is because all these different countries are now independent. And the grand scheme of things was for the countries in South America to be united like the United States of America. However, it didn't fall through, which I'll talk about when we get there. But this is a big deal because now people no longer have to listen to their European controllers. So, were they successful? I'm going to leave it up to you to judge. But here's the information you need to know. Sorry, one too many. But the Latin American leaders, once they leave the country that they just liberated, for example, Ecuador, they're leaving it without a real strong central government. And that's when you're going to notice that the people that have the wealth are going to kind of step in and become the dictators, the land barons, I guess you would say, or the people that are going to have a lot of influence and a lot of say, which I already said, leads to dictatorship. So were they really better off? I don't really know, because now they had to fend for themselves instead of having like an older brother, if you will. But again, the grand scheme was for them to act similar to the United States, but it just never worked out that way. So true or false, the countries of South America were united similar to the United States on North America. And then here's, again, how it all kind of works out. So if you look at these maps, you're going to notice that all these colonies, imperialistic colonies, which we've already talked about in the 1800s, in 30 short years are going to be mostly now be independent from their once controlling. So why do a lot of countries in South America speak Spanish? Well, they're once controlled by Spain. And when you get into Brazil, that's its own unique thing, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But first, the Mexican revolutions. So again, it's kind of a three-step process, I guess you would say. And if you look at the order of how it all goes down, it basically boils down to the same things we've already talked about. People were upset with the Spanish rule. They wanted to try to overthrow them. Didn't work. Second guy's going to try. Didn't work. But then finally, this guy's going to come in. And I don't know how to pronounce their names, and I apologize for that. But this is going to be the military force, I guess you would say. This is going to be finally the one that's going to kick the Spanish rule out and basically put the upper class of Mexico in some sort of control or charge, if you will. But again, the Brazilian Revolution, this one's one of my favorite ones to talk about because when, again, Napoleon is working his way through Europe, he's actually going to work to Portugal. Well, the Portuguese royal family is going to say, no, we're not going to put up with this. So they dipped to their colony of Brazil. And while they're there, Napoleon basically falls out of power and he's going to be overthrown by the republics, which we've already talked about. However, when the royal family went to go move back to Portugal, the son right here, Prince Dom Pedro, is going to say, hey, I'm just going to stay here if that's cool. And they basically broke away from Portugal because the prince wanted to stay. So they had a very peaceful protest, I guess you would say, or peaceful revolution. So was it really revolutionary? I'll let you judge. But that's why they speak Portuguese in Brazil. So true or false, the Brazilian Revolution from Portugal was not peaceful.